In this video, I'll show you all the 5-step time management system that I use to become a top 1% learner. In case you're new here, hi, my name is Harry and I finished year 12 in 2024 with an ATAR of 99, which places me in the top 1% of all students in Australia, whilst also coming 17th in biology in my state out of almost 20,000 students. Throughout the day, as things come into the inbox of your to-do list, things will get quite disorganised as you only have a few seconds to note everything down. Therefore, you need to designate a chunk of time each day, maybe right when you get home from school or work, to go through and sit down and properly process all of these tasks. Now, what do I mean by process the tasks? Well, first of all, you need to make sure you go through and turn everything into a proper, actionable plan. So not just writing study biology, because that doesn't really tell me what I need to be doing. Does that mean do textbook questions, do flashcards, do past papers? It gives me really no direction. And this uncertainty is ultimately just going to make it harder to get started on these tasks, which is just going to lead to procrastination as your brain's going to decide that other tasks, like scrolling Instagram, are going to be easier to do because they're going to lead to a dopamine release much quicker, which ultimately just means that you're not going to get your work done. So go through and be specific with exactly what each task requires. Try and make it so that if two people were trying to complete the same task, they'd have all the information they need to do them almost identically. For example, complete questions 1 to 7 from the biology textbook on page 10, rather than just complete the biology questions. Next, you need to go through and decide exactly how important each task is. Now, I don't just mean, does this task need to be done, or does it not really matter if this task is done or not? Because if it's in your to-do list, we're assuming that everything needs to be done. What I mean is, how much will the completion of this task affect whether or not I achieve my goals? The next thing you should do is go through and set a soft and a hard deadline for each task. So the soft deadline is when you'd like to get everything done, also known as the due date, and then the hard deadline is when does it need to be completed by, also known as the due date. So some school assignment may be due on the 8th of July, but maybe you want to get it done a week before on the 1st. Now the final thing you should do is go ahead and provide an estimation for how long you think each task is going to take you. You'll get better and better at this over time, but in the beginning, while you're not going to be very accurate, the important thing is to try and give yourself enough time to make sure you're not stressing about getting things done. So be fairly lenient in the short term, but over time, gradually try and cut back on how much time you give yourself to test how long it really takes you to complete a task. Now, the best way to figure out exactly how long tasks take you is to have an actual stopwatch with you and make sure that every single time you stop for whatever reason, you pause the timer. This way you'll get a much better indication of how long you're actually staying focused on the task, because if you just use a clock to try and gauge this, that'll take into account all the times you're either answering a phone call or talking to a parent or doing something else that's not actually related to the task at hand. So now that we've gone through and processed all of these tasks, it's now time to plan out your day. So go through, look at your calendar and figure out how much time you have to complete tasks. Now, however much time you think you have, multiply that number by 5/6 and let me explain why. So you might think you have a 3-hour window to get tasks done, but the truth is you're not going to be able to study for that entire 3 hours. You're going to need to take breaks at some point in order to maintain your focus, and so it's important that you factor that in when you're planning out your day. And so the ratio that I use for figuring how much time I truly have to work is based on the Pomodoro technique, which is the idea that you get 1 minute of rest for every 5 minutes that you work. And so that for every 6 minutes of available time, I'm only going to be working 5 minutes. So now that we have a true indication of how long we have to tick off tasks, it's time to select the tasks that we want to complete during the day. But how do we pick which tasks are the most important and which ones we should get done first? And see, when we went through and processed all of our tasks, we actually went and ordered them all by importance and urgency. And so now we can actually display them in a table, which is also known as the Eisenhower matrix. And now, while I'd love to be able to spend all of my time on just those tasks that are most important, the truth is that as students, there are going to be unimportant tasks that are urgent and just need to be done. So the first thing we need to do is see if there's anything that needs to be completed ASAP that is due in the next couple of days. Those are going to be the first things we need to plan, but ideally they shouldn't take up that much time, probably less than an hour every day. So hopefully there aren't too many of these extremely urgent tasks. So now the second step is to go through and look at your important but non-urgent tasks and try and pick out the single most important task that needs to be done. This is going to be our daily focus and is going to be our number one priority throughout the day. Now, because these tasks, while important, aren't necessarily urgent and don't need to be done on this day, I would say that you don't need to spend too much time on these tasks. I would try and aim for about 25 to 30% of your total time studying on these tasks. And now with the remainder of your time available, go to your important and urgent column and begin filling out the rest of your schedule with these tasks. This is where you're going to be spending the majority of your day working. Now we should have a list of all the tasks we want to get done in this session, knowing that we can actually get them all done whilst also taking breaks when we need to. And so the next step is to try and figure out exactly what order we want to put them in. Now, a lot of this comes down to personal preference, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how exactly you can find what works best for you. And so now I used to find that if I had several exams coming up that I had to study for, I'd be able to prepare really well for the first one coming up, but I really wouldn't be able to study that well for the other ones that were coming up later. And the reason I found for this was because the way I was scheduling my time was I'd be putting the most urgent task first, so I'd be studying for the exam that was coming up the soonest first, followed by the second one and the third one and the fourth one. I'd be studying for them in chronological order. And the reason this wasn't working for me was because by the time I was starting to get fatigued later in the day, I'd sort of be looking at my tasks and thinking, these really aren't that urgent. I can save these for another day because that exam isn't for a couple of weeks. So I wouldn't actually get the tasks done. And that means that I just have a build up and build up and build up in my to-do list, and that I'd end up falling behind and I wouldn't perform as well as I should have in the tasks. And so the fix that I found was rearranging my schedule so that I completed the important but not urgent tasks first, because I viewed them as less of a priority. So by the time it was later in the day and I was low in motivation, I wouldn't have to do those ones that I didn't think I really needed to do. But if later in the day I was just left with studying for those exams that were extremely urgent, the ones that were coming up very shortly, I'd be sort of forced to study for those exams because I didn't really have an alternative of just putting them off till a different day. Another issue I had was that unimportant tasks like homework and other things that just needed to be done were taking up far too much of my time, and this was really impacting how well I could prepare for other more important tasks like assessments. And so by leaving these tasks till the very end of the day, right before I go to bed, I was able to compress how long these tasks take me by giving myself an incentive to get them done extra quickly. I just tell myself that as soon as I complete these homework tasks, I can, go watch YouTube, or I can go play video games or something else, and that was able to provide me an incentive to find these shortcuts to get everything done quicker whilst making sure I still got them done. And this ties into another premise which I believe to be of vital importance, which is the idea that you should be matching your energy levels to the tasks you need to complete. So for me, early in the day when I had higher energy levels would be when I complete my more demanding and more important tasks, and then I just leave less demanding tasks like homework till later in the day when I was really tired and just wanted to go to sleep. And whilst for me I found that my energy levels were highest once I got home from school and then they'd slowly taper off throughout the afternoon, this might be completely different for you. So this is where personal preference really plays a key role here, and you need to figure out exactly what works for you. And the only real way to do this is just by trial and error and keeping notes of when you're most high energy and when you're most low energy. And you'll just discover this over time. So, combining all these ideas together, I would spend my first hour completing that priority one, most important but not necessarily urgent task first. And so after I'd finished that task and taken a break long enough to rejuvenate me, I'd move on to my important and urgent tasks, like preparing for upcoming exams, taking breaks wherever I felt necessary. Finally, in the last 30 to 45 minutes, I'd complete all those urgent but not necessarily important tasks like homework before rewarding myself by doing something that I enjoy before going to bed. And there you have it. That was my 5-step time management system that I used to become a top 1% learner in Year 12. Hope you all enjoyed. Thank you for watching.